The roar of motorcycles echoed through the quiet neighborhood, their engines growling like predators on the prowl. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the abandoned lot where a lone K9 German shepherd stood his ground. His ears perked up, his muscles tensed, and his sharp brown eyes locked onto the gang of bikers encircling him. This wasn't just any dog. It was Titan, a highly trained police K9, bred for discipline, courage, and unwavering loyalty. He had been by Officer Jake Miller's side for over 5 years, facing down criminals, sniffing out danger, and saving lives. But now, Jake wasn't here. Titan was alone, and the gang knew it. The leader of the bikers, a burly man covered in tattoos, dismounted his Harley and cracked his knuckles. His leather vest bore the insignia of the Iron Serpents, a notorious outlaw gang known for their ruthless dealings. The others followed suit, forming a loose circle around the dog, their eyes gleaming with malice. "You think you're tough?" Huh. One of them sneered, stepping closer. Titan let out a low growl, his body coiled like a spring. He had faced criminals before, but this was different. He was trained to defend, to protect his handler, but without commands, he had to rely on instinct. The gang wasn't here by chance. They had a score to settle. A few nights ago, Titan had been instrumental in bringing down one of their own, a drug runner caught in a sting operation. They wanted revenge. They wanted to break the dog that had taken down their brother. One of them lunged forward, swinging a heavy chain, aiming to strike. Titan dodged, his reflexes faster than lightning. But before he could counter, another biker pulled out a stun baton, crackling with electricity. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the tension. From the shadows, a tall figure emerged, his stance firm and unyielding. It was Jake, but he wasn't in uniform. No badge, no gun, just him standing between Titan and the gang. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made even the most hardened bikers hesitate. "You really think you can take him?" Jake's voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it. He knew exactly what Titan was capable of. More importantly, he knew something the bikers didn't. Titan wasn't just a dog. He was a weapon, and Jake held the trigger. With a single command in German, Titan sprang into action. What happened next left the gang in utter shock. The air crackled with tension as Titan stood his ground, his sharp eyes never leaving the gang of bikers who had surrounded him. The leader of the group, a tattooed brute with a jagged scar across his jaw, smirked, clearly enjoying the moment. "You know, it's funny," he said, voice dripping with malice. "That mutt of yours put our guy behind bars. Seems only fair we return the favor." His hand shot into his leather vest and reappeared clutching a thick metal chain. He swung it lazily at first, letting it clink ominously against the pavement. The other bikers laughed, some pulling out weapons of their own, pipes, bats, even a switchblade glinting in the dying sunlight. Titan didn't move. He didn't flinch, because he wasn't waiting for them. He was waiting for Jake. From the edge of the lot, Jake Miller took a slow, deliberate step forward, his heart pounding but his face unreadable. He wasn't armed, at least not in a way they could see. "Last chance to walk away," he said evenly, his voice carrying over the rumbling of the motorcycles. The bikers exchanged amused glances. "Or what?" the leader challenged. "You gonna sick your dog on us?" Jake exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. "You don't get it," he said. "Titan isn't just a dog. He's a trained K9. And you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Then, in a single motion, he snapped his fingers and shouted a command in German. Fast. The effect was instant. Titan exploded forward like a missile, launching himself at the nearest biker before anyone could react. The man barely had time to lift his arms before Titan's powerful jaws clamped down on his forearm. A scream tore through the air as the biker stumbled back, the chain falling from his grip. "Get him off," he howled, shaking his arm wildly, but Titan held on like a vice. Another biker rushed forward with a baseball bat, swinging hard at Titan's side. The German shepherd twisted midair, dodging with inhuman speed, and landed on all fours just in time to hear Jake's next command. "Bleed. Stay." Titan froze, his muscles vibrating with restrained energy. The biker who had been attacked fell to his knees, clutching his bleeding arm, panting in fear. The leader's smirk was gone now. His eyes flickered with uncertainty. Jake stepped forward. "Still think this is funny?" he asked coolly. The leader clenched his jaw and reached behind his back. A second later, a gleaming knife was in his grip. "Should have stayed out of this, cop." Jake didn't even blink. Instead, he murmured something so low it was almost lost in the wind. "Titan, Vorin." Attack. Like a shadow, streaking through the dusk, Titan charged, this time faster, lower, more lethal. The leader had only raised his knife halfway when Titan hit him like a freight train, knocking him flat on his back. The blade clattered to the pavement as Titan's massive paws pinned his chest. But he didn't bite. He didn't have to. Titan simply stood over him, his teeth bared in a silent snarl, saliva dripping onto the terrified man's face. His deep, rumbling growl sent a clear message: move, and you'll regret it. The other bikers hesitated, shifting uncertainly. Jake crouched beside their leader, his tone almost conversational. "See, Titan doesn't just attack. He follows commands. That's the difference between him and you. He knows when to stop." Then he straightened and spoke a single word. "Aus, release." Titan immediately stepped back, still watching the leader with predatory focus. Jake turned his gaze to the rest of the gang. "If you want to keep your teeth, I suggest you leave." Now, a few exchanged nervous glances before scrambling for their bikes. Within seconds, engines roared to life, tires screeched against the pavement, and the iron serpents disappeared into the distance, leaving their injured comrade behind. Jake exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He turned to Titan, who sat obediently, waiting for his next instruction. "Good boy," Jake murmured, scratching the dog behind the ears. Titan's tail thumped once. The night was quiet again, except for the distant hum of motorcycles fading into the horizon. The night air was thick with tension. Titan sat beside Jake, his deep brown eyes locked onto the battered biker who remained behind. The leader of the Iron Serpents lay on the pavement, breathing hard, one hand clutching his chest where Titan had pinned him just moments ago. His knife was still a few feet away, glinting under the dim streetlights. Jake took a step forward, towering over the man. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The biker let out a ragged chuckle, despite the pain etched across his face. "You really think this is over, officer?" He spat the word with venom. "We were just supposed to deliver a message." Titan let out a low growl, his ears twitching as he sensed something was off. He wasn't just reacting to the man's tone. There was something else, something unseen. Jake folded his arms. "A message? You brought a whole gang to jump my dog and call that a message?" The biker smiled, teeth streaked with blood. "Titan's not the real target, Miller. You are." Jake's pulse quickened. He had dealt with gang threats before, but this was different. This wasn't just about retaliation for a drug bust. It felt personal. Titan suddenly snapped his head to the right, ears standing erect. His body tensed like a coiled spring. A second later, he let out a deep, guttural growl that sent a chill through Jake's spine. Jake followed the dog's gaze, scanning the darkened lot. The bikers were gone. No movement, no sound, just the hum of streetlights overhead. But Titan didn't growl for nothing. Jake's instincts screamed at him. He reached for his holster, empty. His gun was back in his truck, parked a block away. He hadn't expected a fight when he had followed Titan's GPS tracker here. But Titan had. Something moved in the shadows. A rustle. The faint scuff of a boot against gravel. Titan's growl deepened, but he didn't move. He was waiting for Jake's command. Jake shifted his stance, keeping his voice calm. "You can come out now," he called into the darkness. Silence. Then a voice low, smooth, and eerily controlled. "Impressive." A figure emerged from the shadows between two abandoned buildings. He was lean, dressed in black, his movements calculated. He wasn't a biker. His clothes were too clean, his demeanor too refined. Jake's gut twisted. This was something else. Titan's fur bristled as the stranger stepped closer, stopping just outside the dim light's reach. "Who the hell are you?" Jake demanded. The man tilted his head, eyes flicking between Jake and Titan. "You don't recognize me, do you?" he mused. "Not surprising. But your dog does." Jake's stomach dropped. Titan wasn't just growling. He was trembling. His muscles were locked so tight it looked like he might explode at any second. And then it hit Jake. Titan wasn't afraid. He was furious. Jake had seen Titan take down armed criminals, face gunfire without hesitation, and tear through locked doors to reach his targets. But he had never seen him react like this. The stranger smiled slightly, watching Titan with something almost like admiration. "He remembers me." Jake's breath hitched. "Who is this guy?" The biker on the ground coughed out a laugh. "Told you this wasn't over." Jake ignored him, his focus locked on the man in black. "You've got 5 seconds to explain before I let him go," he warned. The stranger smirked. "Go ahead." Jake hesitated. That wasn't the reaction of a man afraid of being attacked by a trained canine. Titan's growl hit a new octave. Low, primal, more animal than anything Jake had ever heard from him before. The German Shepherd's claws scraped against the pavement as he fought the urge to lunge. Jake had spent years training Titan. He knew every one of the dog's signals. And right now, Titan wasn't just on edge, he was recognizing something. Or someone. Jake narrowed his eyes. "Have we met before?" The stranger let out a quiet chuckle. "Not you, but Titan." His smile widened. "Oh, he knows me very well." Jake's blood ran cold. This man wasn't some random thug. He was someone from Titan's past. And that meant he took a slow step forward, testing a theory. "You were a handler, weren't you?" The man didn't react. But that was all the confirmation Jake needed. Titan's body remained locked, his entire form radiating a mix of recognition and aggression. Jake's mind raced. If this man had been involved in Titan's early training, it had to have been before he was assigned to the force. That meant military or private contracting, high-level training, maybe even black ops. "Who are you really?" Jake asked, his voice a low growl of its own. The man finally stepped into the light, revealing sharp cheekbones, a 5 o'clock shadow, and piercing gray eyes. "The one who trained him before you ever laid hands on him." Jake's grip tightened into fists. "You're lying." "Am I?" The man's eyes gleamed. "Did you ever ask where Titan came from?" Jake had been given a file. He had read about Titan's background. The dog had gone through standard K-9 police training, one of the best in his class. But there had been gaps, missing information, a period of time in Titan's life that had never been accounted for. And now, the missing pieces were standing right in front of him. The man in black let the silence stretch before finally speaking again. "You think you know him, Officer Miller?" His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Titan's past is deeper than you realize. And if you're not careful, it's going to catch up with both of you." Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared back into the shadows. Titan let out a sharp bark, his body tense as if ready to pursue. But Jake didn't give the command, because for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure what he was chasing, or who exactly his dog really was. Jake stood frozen, his pulse hammering in his ears. The man in black had vanished into the night like a ghost, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a dog that was visibly shaken. Titan's breathing was ragged, his powerful chest rising and falling as he kept his gaze locked on the spot where the stranger had disappeared. Jake had never seen Titan like this. Not after a shootout. Not after a fight. Not after anything. This wasn't fear. It was something deeper. A memory buried so far beneath the surface that even Titan hadn't recognized it. Until now. Jake crouched down, placing a firm hand on the German Shepherd's back. "Titan," he murmured. The dog barely reacted. His muscles were coiled so tight, it was as if he were preparing for an attack that might never come. Jake exhaled and tried again. "Buddy, talk to me." Titan's ears twitched. He finally turned his head toward Jake, but his eyes were different. Darker, almost haunted. Jake knew what he had to do. "Track," he ordered softly. Titan hesitated, his instincts warring inside him. But then, ever the soldier, he obeyed. His nose dropped to the pavement, and with a deep inhale, he took off. Jake sprinted after him. Titan weaved through alleys and side streets, his powerful body moving like a predator on the hunt. He wasn't just tracking. He was chasing a ghost from his past. And Jake was chasing the truth. But the deeper they went, the more Jake realized something chilling. Titan wasn't tracking the stranger's fresh scent. He was tracking something old, something familiar. They reached the outskirts of town, where the city lights faded into darkness, swallowed by the remnants of an abandoned industrial district. Titan slowed, his ears twitching, his paws hesitating on the cracked pavement. Then he stopped. Jake almost ran into him. "What is it, boy?" Titan didn't growl, didn't bark. He just stared. Jake followed his gaze and felt his stomach drop. Before them stood a massive, rusted-out warehouse, its windows shattered, its walls covered in graffiti. Jake had never been here before, but Titan had. He could feel it. The German shepherd took a step forward, then another, then broke into a sprint toward the entrance. Jake raced after him. The second he stepped inside, a wave of unease hit him. The air was stale, thick with dust and something else, a lingering presence, as if the walls themselves held secrets no one had spoken aloud in years. Titan moved carefully now, his nose to the floor, his tail low. His paws made no sound as he padded deeper into the darkness. Jake's flashlight cut through the gloom, illuminating old crates, rusted chains, and his breath caught. Training equipment, dog training equipment, bite sleeves, muzzles, obstacles. Some of it was standard K9 training gear, the kind Jake had seen 100 times before. But other pieces? They were different, harsher, more military than law enforcement. This wasn't just a training facility. It was a conditioning ground. Titan sniffed the air, his body visibly trembling now. Not from fear, not from anger, from recognition. Jake swallowed hard. Titan, a noise, a footstep. Jake spun, flashlight beam cutting across the darkness. And there he was, the stranger, standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them. Titan didn't growl this time. He just stared, like he was seeing a ghost. The man in black tilted his head. He remembers now. Jake took a step forward, shielding Titan instinctively. "Who are you?" The man exhaled, stepping fully into the light. "The one who made him who he is." Jake's stomach twisted. That's not an answer. The stranger studied Titan with something almost like pride. "You ever wonder why he's different? Why he's better than every other K9 you've worked with?" Jake's jaw tightened. He had wondered. Titan wasn't just good. He was exceptional. Too fast. Too smart. Too aware. The pieces were falling into place, and Jake didn't like what they were forming. "You trained him," Jake said slowly. The stranger nodded. "Before he was ever assigned to you, Titan wasn't just a police dog. He was something more. A prototype. An experiment." Jake's breath hitched. No, that wasn't possible. Titan had been bred for the Force. Raised in a controlled environment. Given the best training. Hadn't he? The stranger's smirk deepened. "You never questioned the missing gaps in his records, did you?" Jake felt his pulse hammering. "I should have." Titan let out a small whimper. A heartbreaking sound. One Jake had never heard from him before. Jake looked down at his partner, his best friend, his family. And suddenly he realized. Titan didn't just remember. He understood. The truth. The past. And the betrayal. Jake clenched his fists, turning back to the man. "What did you do to him?" The stranger shrugged. "I made him into what he was meant to be." Jake took a step closer, his fury barely contained. "And what's that?" The man smiled. "A weapon." Titan tensed at the word, his ears flattening, his tail lowering. Jake's got twisted. Titan wasn't just a K9 officer. He wasn't just a dog trained to protect and serve. He was built, engineered, designed for something far worse. Jake swallowed hard. "You're wrong." The man arched a brow. "Am I?" Jake dropped to one knee beside Titan, gently gripping the dog's face, forcing their eyes to meet. Titan was different. He always had been. But not because of whatever they had done to him. Not because of training or conditioning. Because of his heart. Because of who he had chosen to be. "You're not a weapon," Jake said firmly, his voice breaking just a little. "You never were." Titan whined softly, pressing his forehead against Jake's. A beat of silence. Then, a single command. Not from Jake. From a man in black. A sharp, foreign phrase, something Titan knew. Titan's body jerked. His breathing hitched. His muscles seized. The stranger was activating something. An old command. Something from before Jake. Something buried inside him. Titan's eyes flashed with panic. His paws trembled. "No," Jake said instantly. "Titan, look at me." Titan's breath came faster. His pupils dilated. His training was fighting to override him. His mind was at war. Jake grabbed his face, holding him steady. "Stay with me, buddy." Titan whimpered. His whole body shook. The stranger smirked. "You can't fight what he is." Jake's grip tightened. "Yes, he can." Titan let out a sharp bark. His body convulsed. And then, with every ounce of willpower, he snapped his head toward Jake. Not the stranger. Not his past. Jake. The command had failed. Because Titan wasn't his anymore. He was Jake's. He was his own. Titan let out a low, defiant growl. A new growl. One filled not with confusion, but with clarity. The stranger's smirk faltered. Titan took a step forward, standing between Jake and the man. His chest puffed out, his stance strong. He wasn't afraid anymore. The man's eyes darkened. He exhaled, shaking his head. "I see." Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he vanished. Titan didn't chase him this time, because he had already won. Jake let out a breath, pressing his forehead to Titan's again. "You're mine, buddy," he whispered. "Not theirs." Titan let out a soft whine, and for the first time that night, his tail wagged. Jake sat on the tailgate of his truck, the cool night air carrying the distant hum of the city. Titan lay beside him, his massive head resting on Jake's knee, his warm breath steady now. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. Jake ran his fingers through Titan's fur, his mind still reeling from what had just happened. The stranger's words played over and over in his head. A weapon. You can't fight what he is. But Titan had fought. He had broken free of whatever they had done to him, whatever they had tried to turn him into. Because Titan wasn't a weapon. He was a soul, a living, breathing being with a choice. And tonight, when it mattered most, he had chosen Jake. Jake swallowed hard, blinking against the emotion tightening in his chest. He had always known Titan was special, but this changed everything. He exhaled slowly. "Guess we both learned something tonight, huh, buddy?" Titan lifted his head, his deep brown eyes meeting Jake's. They were filled with understanding, with something deeper than instinct, trust. Jake smiled, rubbing behind his ears. "You're not what they made you," he murmured. "You're who you decide to be." Titan huffed, nudging Jake's hand as if to say, "And I choose you." The weight of the night pressed down on Jake, but somehow it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt right. Because no matter what had happened before, no matter what ghosts lurked in Titan's past, one thing was certain. He wasn't alone. And neither was Jake. 1 month later, the morning sun spilled golden light across the training grounds. The air smelled of fresh grass, warm earth, and the faintest hint of autumn. Officers stood in a semicircle, their K-9 partners at their sides, waiting for the demonstration to begin. Jake stood at the front, his uniform crisp, his badge gleaming. Titan sat beside him, alert but calm. His ears perked as he watched the younger dogs fidget in place. Chief Reynolds clapped Jake on the shoulder. "You ready?" Jake smirked. "Always." The chief turned to the trainees. "Listen up. Today, you'll see firsthand why Officer Miller and Titan are one of the best K-9 teams in the state." The officers murmured in excitement. Jake had trained plenty of rookies, but this was different. Today wasn't just about showing Titan's skill. It was about showing his heart. Jake met Titan's gaze. "Ready, boy." Titan's tail gave one confident wag. Jake stepped forward, addressing the trainees. A K-9 isn't just a tool. He isn't just a piece of equipment or an asset to be deployed. He's a partner. His voice softened. A friend. The rookies listened intently, their expressions shifting from curiosity to something deeper. Jake took a breath. They say a dog is loyal no matter what, that they'll follow commands without question. But what makes a truly great K-9? He looked down at Titan and smiled. A dog that chooses loyalty. Titan's ears twitched, as if he understood every word. Jake turned back to the trainees. You don't earn that with training alone. You earn it with trust, with respect, with love. A quiet fell over the group, the weight of his words settling in. Jake knelt beside Titan, gripping his harness. Titan isn't great because of where he came from. He isn't great because of what was done to him. He's great because he decided to be. And that, Jake gave Titan a scratch behind the ears, is what makes him a hero. The officers broke into applause, but Jake barely heard it. Because Titan wasn't looking at them. He was looking at him. And in those deep brown eyes, Jake saw everything. Not a weapon. Not an experiment. Not a machine built for war. Just Titan. His partner. His friend. His family. Jake smiled. Come on, buddy. Titan wagged his tail. And together, they walked forward into the future they had chosen.